Corruption is something that people sometimes think is happening somewhere over there in a country that they know perhaps very little about. But in fact, major corruption, which is affecting many millions of people every day, is actually facilitated right here in our very own backyard by our whole global financial system and the lack of accountability and the problem of anonymous shell companies and the failure of our governments to really tackle this issue.
And the big problem is that some of the poorest people in the world are not benefiting from the natural resources they own. So it's really important to know where the money goes from those resources. And if it's going into the pockets of corrupt officials and into the pockets of companies who were in collusion with those officials, then that's absolutely wrong.
So a whole load of Global Witnesses campaigns look at the role of natural resources in funding conflict and corruption.
So from that really has developed a lot of our methodology, which is about in-depth investigations, building up irrefutable evidence.
Oh really? They know where the money's gone.
And then really working to create very specific change to have an impact.
We use a range of different ways of gathering information. Some of it is carrying in video cameras, recording devices when we go into a country like Cambodia or Laos. But we also work with local researchers and people on the ground. We maintain very regular communication with some of the communities which have been impacted by these large-scale land investments.
It's a great team here. It feels like you're juggling. Every day you've got a different ball in your hand and you're trying to keep them all in the air to keep things going and to keep pushing things forwards.
Yeah, which is why I'm asking you for guesstimates of these numbers so we can see, do I stand any chance of getting this or...
Corrupt dictators who steal their country's money often want to get it to the West, using banks and wire transfers and companies to hide who that money belongs to. What we're actually talking about is one of the mechanisms that keeps poor countries and poor people poor.
If there's anything happening in terms of intimidations, I've seen people with no economic power who can't pay a lawyer, who even have no idea about their own rights and are helpless against the power of politicians, of politics, against the power of logging companies, economic power, power of influence.
For example, it might be as much as $10 is lost from Africa in illicit financial flows for every dollar that goes in aid.
So we're about trying to make governments do the right thing and business do the right thing.
Sometimes it's focusing on looking at the national laws and making sure that the government is following its own laws. But in other cases, we look at the role of the company itself and whether or not there can be influence brought on the company through its investors, for example.
And making companies responsible for their supply chains, checking their supply chains, making supply chains more transparent, publishing what they're doing and really holding companies publicly to account.
For example, we alerted the world to the problem of blood diamonds. And there is law now in America and in Europe that covers the value of 2/3 of the oil and gas and mining companies worldwide. We're changing how people think about an issue.
And if we can make it harder for corrupt dictators to move their money around the world, then we make it harder for terrorists and arms smugglers to move their money around the world too.
Change is long term, it won't happen overnight. And some people say corruption, it's just so complicated, it's there, we can't do anything about it. So does that mean we just look the other way? I think not.
I've always been an activist and this kind of work is work that I can't ignore and I can't step away from.
Getting up out of bed each morning in order to do something that's actually going to change the world.
When I started with Global Witness, I had nice curly brown hair and now it's grey and straight.
But regardless of how difficult or scary it can be, I will keep going and I'll keep fighting the fight.
It's like creating a whole movement. It's like the anti-corruption movement. We're after getting the bad guys.